Hello and welcome. This is 10 a.m. to the point editorial discussion by NICOBAR. In this video, we are going to comprehensively discuss all the editorial articles from the Hindu on 25th June 2024. So, in the editorial page of Hindu, we have a few articles for detailed discussion today. We have an article on the Nicobar project, the Great Nicobar project, which we will discuss in detail in the context of disaster management as well as environment. Then we have an article on the Indian Himalayan region, which is very prone to disasters now. That will also be discussed in the context of disaster management as well as environment. Then we have an article on the India Maldevis policy, which is one of the major foreign policy issues of India at present. And finally, we have an article that deals with the ethics paper of GS Poe. It deals with the idea of cultural relativism and universalism. We'll have a detailed discussion on these four articles. Then we'll have quick overview of the other articles. The other articles include an article on the status quo in the Manipur issue, an article on the loss of BJD in Odisha, and an article on the CSDS Lognidi survey on the issue of Ram Mandir and BJP's performance in the recently concluded elections. So let's move to the articles one by one. First, we will have the quick overviews, and the first article for discussion is the article on the Manipur issue. So just take the statistics now. So as of now, if your question on Manipur is coming, you should be aware of the statistics. 221 people are killed and 50,000 people are displaced. So this is the casualty rate of the particular incident. And the article is very critical of the government. It says that even though the article, the situation in the Manipur is very staggering, there is no declaration, official declaration of the president's rule yet. But even when the official declaration is not there, all the provisions in the section 355, article 355 of the constitution is imposed in Manipur. So de facto imposition of the provisions of 355 is there, but there is no official declaration. So the newspaper views it as an attempt to shield the incumbent chief minister from the repercussions. So as per article 355 of the constitution, it is the duty of the union government to protect the state from either external aggression or internal disturbance. So you know that from 352 onwards, article 352 onwards, we deal with emergency provisions. So article 352 deals with national emergency, Article 356 deals with state emergency, and Article 360 deals with financial emergency. So under this 356, 355 comes in the same context. It deals with the declaration of emergency in a state. Here it clearly mentions that it is the duty of the union government to protect the state from external aggression or internal disturbance. The newspaper says that this process is taking place, the stringent provisions are being imposed, but there is no official declaration. And there is no point in maintaining the status quo like this. Because if the status quo is maintained like this, the incumbent government in the state will continue. If the incumbent government in the state is continuing, the casualties are going to rise. The newspaper accuses the incumbent leadership of not rising beyond ethnic bias. So you know that the conflict in Manipur is between two tribal groups, two social groups to be precise. One is the Kukis, which are the ethnic tribal groups, and second are the Meiteis. The incumbent chief minister belongs to the Meitei faction. So the newspaper or the editorial accuses the incumbent government of not rising beyond their regional biases or the ethnic biases. They don't have an accommodative stance, in other words. So as a result, the editorial pitches for a change in the status quo, a change in the leadership, and a change in the situation in Manipur at present. Let's move to the second article. It deals with the section of state of play, which takes one state into account in every day's editorial page. And today's discussion is on the Odisha. To be precise, the loss of BJD after 24 years of long reign. So Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik was the helm of this party. They ruled the state for almost 24 years, and in the recent elections they had a tally of 0 seats into the Lok Sabha. So they lost the state and they scored 0 seats in the Lok Sabha. So what led to the decline of such a towering party? Analyzes the article. The article says that there are three reasons for this. The first reason is the over dependence on bureaucracy. And this over dependence came at the cost of party cadres. So if you take the particular incident of V.K. Pandian, he was a former IAS officer of the Odisha cadre. He is from Tamil Nadu. So he was a close ally or a close attendant of the Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik. Later he resigned and he joined politics. So he was part of the BJD in this current election, and the opposition led their campaign attacking this particular person. One of the important slogans of the opposition was that the keys of the Puri Jagannath temple in Odisha was being taken to Tamil Nadu. It was a divisive and regressive campaign, but that worked, and as a result BJD lost, and this person quit politics after the election results. So the article accuses that it is not just V.K. Pandit, but there was an entire dependency on bureaucracy in the state, and this weakened the local party cadres, and subsequently there was an organizational decay in the party. And finally the party is also accused of ideological inconsistency. So in 2009 the BJD left the NDA alliance. They accused the BJP of being anti-secular in nature, and they called themselves secular. But in the years post this breaking of alliance, the BJD supported every bill that is brought by the BJP. One recent example that the article itself suggests is the nomination of Ashwini Vaishnav to the parliament, to the Rajya Sabha in precise. The nomination of Ashwini Vaishnav to Rajya Sabha was done by the BJD party, and within a few months Ashwini Vaishnav was campaigning against the BJD in Odisha. So this lack of ideological consistency was punished by the people of Odisha in these elections. So that's the analysis of the second article. The third article is based on the data. This is a Hindu data point based on the CSDS data. It analyzes whether Ram Mandir was an issue in the 2024 Lok Sabha polls at all. So they have a mechanism for doing this. What they did was they asked the people about the most approved work of BJP. So this was an open-ended question because no options were given. And to that question, 22% brought forth the issue of Ram Mandir. So for 22% of the voters, Ram Mandir was most approved work of BJP. But the factor lies in the opposite question. The opposite question was the most disapproved work of BJP. That was also an open-ended question. No options were given. And there, 29% responded with price rise, 27% responded with unemployment. And this suggests that even though Ram Mandir was a significant issue, it was outshined or outdone by issues like price rise or unemployment. Therefore, this was not the major electoral issue. So that is how the CSDS post-poll survey concludes its data. Let's move to the detailed discussion part of today's editorial page. The first article is on the Great Nicobar project. So the Great Nicobar project is a flagship scheme of the government. So it is important in the environment perspective. I'll explain why in the coming parts. And it is important for prelims as well because it gives you certain pointers with respect to prelims. Now what exactly is the project? The project has three or four major items under its list. Under the Great Nicobar project, there will be a revamping of the Great Nicobar Islands with infrastructure development. And the infrastructure includes a transshipment port, an international airport, a township that is going to be developed, then a 450 megawatt gas and solar based power plant. So if you look at these things in isolation, these are very fine projects: transshipment, airport, township, gas and solar based power plant. All these are very good. But the issue comes because of its strategic location. And when you take Andaman and Nicobars, the government puts forth an argument. It says that the reason why we are developing this particular island, it is because we have to leverage the strategic location. Because Andaman and Nicobar is just 90 kilometers away from the Malacca Strait. So from the Malacca Strait, Andaman and Nicobar is just 90 kilometers away. So the government wants to use this strategic location, but the critics also accuse the government of using this location for tourism development. So when it comes to tourism development, around becomes a commercial interest and not a strategic interest. So we talk about developing border roads at the cost of environment, because these are strategic reasons which cannot be avoided. But when it comes to tourism, these are commercial interests that can be compromised at the cost of environment. Now, if you take the concerns, these concerns often outnumber, or the concerns are more grave than the development that is going to happen. It is a trilemma. Actually, there's a triple dilemma. First, we have to push for the infrastructure, and that is the first thing that the government is planning to do. But it comes at the cost of the pristine forest in the region, because total 9.6 lakh trees have to be felled. This is the data given by the government in the parliament. Total now 9.6 lakh trees have to be cut down, and the government is planning for a compulsory afforestation in Haryana, which is far away from the Nicobar region. So if you take the Nicobar region, the Tropic of Cancer passes through the Gujarat part. That Nicobar region is part of the tropical region. It is close to the equator, below the Tropic of Cancer. It has mainly the tropical rainforest. And if you take Haryana, which is located in the subtropical region, it is a subtropical region which has temperate vegetation. So the entire nature of vegetation is going to change. So mere planting of trees is not going to compensate. And Great Nicobar is also home to multiple rare species like the leatherback turtle. So if you plant trees in Haryana, how are you going to reaccommodate species like this? And we talked about triple dilemma. One is infrastructure development, protection of pristine forest, and the indigenous inhabitants' rights, especially tribes like Shompen, particularly vulnerable tribes, who has been indigenous inhabitants in this region for a long time. So when these three things come together, we have a dilemma, what to prioritize, and that is called the trilemma. In this issue, it's a clear case of trilemma. It is a clear case of development versus environment debate. The article also accuses the government of keeping the environment clearance process under the wraps. It says that the process is not transparent. Usually the process is supposed to be in public domain, where public can do a public audit, not just through the environment impact assessment, but through the general publication of these documents. People can take a social audit of it. But since the clearance is done with a lot of secrecy, this is not happening in India. So on a whole, this project is more criticized than being appreciated. So understand the nature of the project, what is going to come, understand its concerns, and that's the takeaway from this article. We'll move to the next article. This is on the similar lines. It's on the Indian Himalayan region. Again, the same question of environment and development. Here, the picture of disaster management comes in more clearly, because there was two recent major disasters in that region. One was the monsoon floods in the Himachal Pradesh region. So you should know that Himachal Pradesh is known for its apple production, and the apple production suffered huge loss due to this monsoon floods. Second is the breach of Teesta Dam in Sikkim. Sikkim is part of the eastern Himalayan region. So these two case studies can be quoted in an answer on disaster management in the Himalayan region. So these two happened in the year 2023. And there are a series of issues that are suggested as causes for incidents like these. One is the bumper crop. This is the term that the author uses. Bumper crop of hydroelectric projects. So it simply means that there is a proliferation of hydroelectric projects in the region. Second, there is reckless widening of roads. So infrastructure is being constructed and roads are being widened, but that comes at the cost of the environment. Third, there is a violation of laws. Now, this third and fourth reasons, these are found by the National Disaster Management Authority when it examined the causes for the Himachal Pradesh floods. When these causes were examined, they found two reasons. One was violation of laws, sometimes even court orders for encroachments. And these encroachments were very often on the river beds. So the natural flow of the river is being stopped by the encroachments. Second is the loss of green cover. So when green cover is lost, the natural soil retention capacity of the hills will be reduced, and this will cause landslides. If you take the relevance of the Himalayan region, it is the water tower of India, because yesterday also we discussed this part. If you take the Himalayas, it is home to a lot of glaciers, And from these glaciers, you take the Bandepur glacier, you take the Gangotri glacier, all these glaciers that supplies perennial rivers with their waters like the Ganga, the Brahmaputra, the Yamuna, the Indus, all these rivers stem from the Himalayan region. So if the glaciers from the Himalayan region gets exhausted, the water tower of India will also get exhausted. That's the first thing. Second, it is also a supplier of crucial ecosystem services. You take the willows, the Kashmiri willows, or the different species like the sheeps, the saffron trade. All these things are being supplied by the region. So that also will get affected. So considering all these, we should understand the context in which the Supreme Court has recently come up with a few judgments. So the UPSC in the past in mains has asked about the constitutionalization of environment laws. And UPSC very often asks about case laws that needs to be quoted in the GS2 paper. Here you have two case laws. In the first case, which is State of Telangana versus others versus Muhammad, case say State of Telangana and others versus Muhammad Abdul Qasim case. In this case, the Supreme Court said that the need of the hour is to adopt an eccentric view of the environment where nature is at the core. So basically, it's a ecocentric view that the Supreme Court upholds. What we have is two kind of views. One is ecocentric and the other is anthropocentric. Anthropocentric is the human-centric view where we prioritize development. Ecocentric is the nature-centric view where we prioritize environment. So Supreme Court is taking an ecocentric view, says the author. Supreme Court also said that without a clean environment which is stable and unimpacted by the vagaries of climate change, the right to life is not fully recognized. So right to life falls under Article 21. So right to life is not fully recognized without a right to clean environment. So on this lines, we have to prioritize an ecocentric view and we have to take into account the sustainable development of the Indian Himalayan region, says the author. Let's move to the third article, which is in the perspective of international relations in GS2 paper. It is on the India-Maldives relations. Now we have to understand that for a long time, for the last few months, India and Maldives were having tensions. The new president, Mohammad Musu, came into power and he came into power through a strategic India out campaign. So this is a nationalist government in Maldives right now, and this government came with an India out campaign. This should be seen in a context of things, because the foreign policy of the Mohammad Morsi government was that first they have to reduce the dependence on India. Second, they have to engage more closely with China because they are over dependent on India right now. We had a lot of supplies for them, including military personnels. So they banked on reducing the dependence of India and increasing the engagement with China. They also wanted to diversify their foreign relations with countries like US, countries like Japan, etc. But what they faced was a series of setbacks as a result of this campaign. First of all, they face an economic crisis. They have a balance of payment crisis. They are over dependent on India for basic facilities like agricultural imports and medical facilities. So the country is facing an economic crisis, and without depending on India, they cannot move ahead. Second, they expected China to invest in their big infrastructure projects. But China was more focused on investing in social infrastructure like houses, public upliftment, etc. They are reluctant to invest in big infrastructure. This was a setback to the Maldives foreign policy. And finally, even when the government of Maldives was so antagonistic against India, India continued to have an accommodative stance. The foreign minister met them time and again. They were invited for the swearing-in ceremony of the new prime minister, and we reached out to them when they asked to withdraw the military personnel. We withdrew 75 of them, and we were accommodated. We continued to maintain our age-old stance with Maldives. As a result, they had to rethink their foreign policy, which was centered around the India out campaign. So this is not a conclusive statement. This is the apprehensions of the authors based on the current trends. So our takeaway from this is the stand that was of the Maldives government. and the current situation or the setbacks that the government is facing, and India's accommodative position towards the Maldives. So that's the takeaway from this particular article. Let's move to the final article. Now, this article is titled Cultural Relativism versus Universalism. It deals with a case study. The takeaway for us is the theory of cultural relativism versus universalism. So first, let's analyze the case. What exactly is the case? I'll explain the case. Recently, the Madras High Court in 2020, before that I'll explain the incident. Now, in a place in Tamil Nadu, you need not know the exact place, this is a religious place. There are two practices. One is Annadana and second is Anga Pradikshana. This Anga Pradikshana is this Annadana, you should understand, is a process of giving free food. So people eat food in leaves, and after having this food, these leaves are kept out, and over these leaves people will roll over. And this rolling over is ritualistic in nature, and that rolling over is known as the Anga Pradikshana. So people rolling over leftover leaves from which food is taken is called the Anga Pradikshana. And this particular incident is the bone of contention here. Because in 2015, the Madras High Court banned this particular practice. This ban, in this particular branch, it was a division bench of the Madras High Court. They took into consideration a case in 2024, which was taken up by the Supreme Court. And there was a similar incident that took place in South Kannada. That was also a ritualistic practice. A similar practice which was banned by the Supreme Court in 2014. The Madras High Court considered this case and they banned the incident of Anga Pradikshana in Tamil Nadu as well. Now, why is it an issue now? Because in 2024, which is at present, a single bench of the Madras High Court, the Madurai bench, revised this order of banning this particular practice and interpreted this particular practice under the ambit of Article 25(1) of the Indian Constitution, which is right to worship. So, right to worship, freedom of religion, all these things are constitutional rights. So, the Madras High Court considered this under Article 25. It also brought it under the ambit of the right to privacy. It said that if right to privacy have sexual connotations or gender connotations, it should also have a spiritual connotation as well. Now, how is it linked to the debate of cultural relativism versus universalism? When you think of this particular issue from a universal perspective, this practice is unhealthy because people are rolling over waste food. It is harmful because it can harm them. Finally, it affects human dignity. If you take the case of the Karnataka issue, the food was eaten by the Brahmins and the rolling part was taken by people in the lower caste. In this particular judgment, the Tamil Nadu judge says that in this case, it is not the case. Here, there is no such caste division as such, because the food is taken by everyone and anybody who can volunteer can roll over the leftover plates. But whatever it is a practice that affects human dignity. Now, if you look at a universal perspective, such beliefs and practices can be merely dismissed as superstitions as well. You can take account of UN Charter on Human Rights, which considers human dignity in its preamble. So when you take things like that into consideration, this practice is an outdated practice that needs to be banned. And that perspective is the universalist perspective. The counter perspective to this is the cultural relativism perspective. Cultural relativism talks about prioritizing customs and rituals. Whatever is cultural should be prioritized over universal values. And in that case, the state will have no right to intervene, because this is the culture of people. In the name of culture, anything can be defended in cultural relativism. One other example from Tamil Nadu itself is the Jellicut. So Jellicut is a sport that involves animals. So an organization called PETA went to court and they got the particular tradition to be banned because it involved torture of animals. Then there was widespread protest from the entire state. It was seen as an encroachment on the cultural rights of the state, and the government came up with a legislation to overrule the court judgment. So their cultural relativism prevailed over universalism. Now the Jellicut case cannot be clearly equated with this case, but I just gave it an example to get an idea of universalism versus cultural relativism. So understand the concepts, understand the case studies, use it as at your discretion in case you need it. That's the takeaway from the Hindu editorial of June 25th, 2024. Thank you for listening.